Okay. We are recording. Super. And can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Well,
super.
Are there going to be other people coming on? Or
there are. We have several people joining us right now who are just watching us live as we all have this conversation today. So they can see us and hear us, and we cannot hear them or see them, but they are invited to any questions that they have in the chat, and we will enjoy answering those questions as we go. So I'm going to kick it right off here and welcome everybody to the final spring installment of Story of Place. This has been a really fun series that we started back in January, and we started it in honor of our dear friend, the late Captain Bob Slavin, whose sort of infectious love and desire to know your place really is inspirational. And so we started the series with a pre-recorded video we did with him, and we've done several trust properties, including with Susan and Norman, who were on one a couple of months ago. And we'll look forward to picking this back up in the fall once we've all gotten done with the summer busy season. So more is to come. And I do want to acknowledge that these stories of place, at least for now, are the conservation stories, or sort of the more modern day stories. And we recognize and acknowledge and are deeply grateful the whole human history of these places and the care for the land that the Wabanaki people, who this is still their homeland, have shown and are continuing to teach. So today we're going to talk about the Patten Stream Preserve conservation area and talk about the conservation story and the other conservation sort of spin-off success stories that have happened at this place. And I unfortunately could not be joined today by Jim Dow, the former executive director of Blue Hill Heritage Trust, but we are really excited to have Susan Shetterly, who is a longtime Blue Hill Heritage Trust volunteer, has served on the board, continues to serve on the lands committee, helps with some stewardship projects, and her friend Norman Mrozicki, her neighbor, and Norman also longtime Blue Hill Heritage Trust volunteer on the board, on the lands committee, helping with stewardship of the properties down there in Morgan Bay with his family. And Hans Carlson, our executive director at the trust. And we're going to have a great conversation today. We're going to talk about sort of the really big conservation footprint that exists out in the Patten Stream area, which started as a very small, just sort of 40-acre parcel, and now is a kind of a behemoth. It's one of our largest conservation footprints on the entire peninsula. And there have been some other really fun success stories that have been attached to this along the way, including the Alewife restoration work that has gone on in Patten Stream. And this is the 5th anniversary of that big restoration project. I will say that growing up in Surry, and on the waters of Surry, both the fresh and the salt water, I did not know about Alewife growing up. This was not a part of my life. And I grew up going to school right on Patten Stream. And so now as an adult and somebody who has the very fortunate circumstances of having a job where I get to go and really learn about this place where I grew up, it's so surprising to me to learn about these incredible natural phenomenon that happened and were happening all around me my whole life that I just never was aware of. And the first time I hiked Patten Stream Preserve, I was absolutely floored by how beautiful it was. This photo here on the right was one that I took on my very first hike there. And the cardinal flowers were in bloom and the hemlocks were so green and soft. And it floored me. I couldn't believe that this place was right there where I grew up and I had never been there before. And then I got introduced to the fish, and it was shocking to me how many fish there were and how many other birds and seals and other things were happening because of it, and all that the people were doing to sustain this, this species, and how important it was. And so now the spring alewife migration, and if you're Facebook friends with me, you know this, is my favorite thing. And I go and I try to hit all the hot spots, and I love it. And I love taking other kids and families there and getting them right in the water to experience it, because I think it just really helped that excitement and that knowledge and that love for this place. So I am particularly excited to do this story of place because the fish are running right now. And I hope everybody on this call or who watches this in the next couple of weeks will get out to one of these sites where the alewife are running and really learn about it. And this story is so fun because it really talks about the connected landscape. And you see this slide here. It's true that you're not just the land and that's all, you've protected it. It really spirals out, and it helps and serves so many other greater purposes, which is really exciting and fun. So I'm going to stop talking, but I was excited to share that little personal connection of my own. And I'm going to throw it over to Hans. And Hans, can you talk a little bit about how all of this began? How did this sort of now huge conservation block begin?
Sure. Yeah, and let me before I answer that question, let me add on, but basically to what you were saying before. The Alewife Restoration Projects are some of the most exciting, unexpected conservation going on this peninsula that I didn't know about until I got here. And part of it is the fact that, these kind of migrations, whether it's alewives or Canada geese or caribou on the tundra, there's something humbling and sort of inspiring about the return home that these animals go through. And there's also the human story, which you were talking about before, which this connection between land and people that happens because of this annual migration. It's really fascinating and it's inspiring. As you said, this big conservation block started out very small with 40 or 41 acres of land that was formerly owned by Dave Warren, who a lot of people who have been in Surry for a long time knew Dave. And he had a relationship with our former stewardship director, Eric Rowland. And he wanted to see this land conserved. And so he and Jim Dow and the board worked together to figure out how the purchase could happen. MCHT was involved in this. We borrowed the money actually from MCHT to Maine Coast Heritage Trust to be able to make the initial purchase. And then the second, so this was 2008, 2009. And then the second parcel, which is just to the north of where you go hiking, which is an even smaller parcel, happened almost immediately after that. And that was just a real estate transaction, that a piece of property that Jim noticed was for sale in the paper, and the trust bought it. That land, it involved Dave Warren to a certain extent, and Dave's name is going to come up again and again here because so much of what we're talking about here was both either his land or Herb Haynes prior to being ours. So it started out as less than 50 acres, maybe just a little bit more than 50 acres. And we can talk about the rest of the story as we move on, but we're now up to 2,300 and something acres conserved in this area. It's a pretty amazing place.
Yeah, and we'll have some cool maps to show people as we move along. Norman, I want to ask you, you were a board member at the time, and Susan, please feel free to jump in, because you were a board member probably as these conversations were happening, and you got off the board right before the transaction went through. But Norman, can you talk a little bit? You're living in Surry, you're raising a family in Surry. What did it mean to you to see this piece of property conserved along Patten Stream?
Well, I actually been back there a number of times before the trust got involved with the property. and I thought it was kind of a magical spot because it's in the middle of the town and it's kind of down where the stream is. The stream is very heavy through there, lots of boulders and rapids and things. And I could see one side there's the gravel pit, which was boundless. They could have kept digging gravel there toward the stream. I guess there's some kind of restriction how close to the stream they could get, but it was headed that way. And on the other side were a number of houses started and lots that were probably going to sell soon. And I was really thrilled that just out of the blue, this piece of land, this where the stream runs through, was being looked at by the trust. And it's a magical spot. It's like my granddaughters probably built fairy houses all over the place. It's that kind of place. I was thrilled that happened. And once it went through, I got involved with developing trails on the property, and that went for some time. I worked with Peter Coleman. He laid out the trails, and I'd worked with him briefly on other projects.
Whoa.
But this one, I really got to know him as a master trail builder. He anybody can build a path from point A to point B, but he had a knack for making it aesthetically pleasing that I never even thought existed. I mean, that concept I never attached that to trails, but he had that ability. He would see where a trail could go and make the whole place look better. Anyway, I think he's a real valuable asset to the Hancock County.
Yeah, he sure is.
Yeah. So I don't know. What do I tell you about? Once the property was acquired, it just became a highlight of the whole area, and a thrill to go there. And backing up to the alewife business, in something like 12 years ago, Susan Shetterly is my neighbor, and she told me that there was this condition with the alewives coming in from the bay, and I had no idea that such a thing exists, that there was a problem there at all. And then one day I went with her to the head of the bay, and where the stream comes down, the Hemron stream comes down and pours into the bay. And there were thousands of fish backed up behind this, not big, but effective falls right there at the bottom of the hill there. And I had no idea that such thing existed. And there's no way for them to get up. During low tide, there was no way for them to go from the bay up into the stream and then finally up into the pond. So we figured, well, we could just carry them up there, or at least across the road. And we did that. I guess, I don't know, I seem to remember going up for a while. Susan was telling me it was just 1 year that we did this. We scooped the fish up in buckets and pails, fairly small ones, and literally walked up the hill to the top, to the road, across the road, down the hill on the other side, and put them in the stream on the other side. Probably the least effective way to actually transport fish in that condition. I'm sure the intention was best, and I'm sure the fish appreciate it. But as far as effectively restocking the bay, the stream and whatnot with fish, it was not real effective. But it was interesting.
We'll and we have a lot of photos later on about all of the manpower that went in and the work. Before we jump into that, I want to kick it back to Hans, because this brings up this really good question of, when you think about why are you conserving an area, when you're conserving land in a watershed, you're really looking at significance of that whole area, not just of the land itself, but you're really thinking about the land and the water and how they interact with each other. Hans, what did the trust know about this property, and what have we sort of learned about the ecological significance of that area?
Yeah, what the trust knew before they went ahead, I really haven't been able to read into the history to find out what they knew, but what they found out after, or what we found out after purchase was really what a special little place this is. Even on the, well, let's start with the bigger picture. So Downeast, Maine is one of the last places, in fact, it may be the last place where the forest actually goes right down to the ocean on the eastern seaboard. That just doesn't happen in most other places. And on a lot of the Downeast coast, it's the kind of spruce fir forest that we have on mostly on the peninsula here. The little hollow that comes down that stream is it's a slightly different kind of ecology in there. There's a hemlock forest component there, which is, it's not, you know, it's not unique, but there are more hemlocks in that little cool valley there than there are in a lot of other places on the peninsula. And that kind of stream that comes down through a ravine like that with a hemlock forest is it's not only, you know, really wonderful habitat for alewives, but it's a wonderful habitat for brook trout and then all the things that build up the landscape, up the watershed from the healthy stream. You mentioned cardinal flower. That's a fantastic place to see wildflowers at different times of the season.
Yeah, trillium are out right now.
Yeah, and the wetland complexes that are up above the stream there are also amazing habitats, and we'll get into that when we start talking about the bigger picture. But the starting with protecting that little bit of stream corridor led on to then protecting the larger wetland complexes, which are habitat for beavers and muskrat and moose and, you know, a whole variety of other animals and plants, all of which in the end help the alewife, you know, do their yearly run on the river.
Yeah. Susan, so tell us a little bit about, and we'll sort of go back and forth here in the, you know, on the timeline, but tell us a little bit about the Surry Alewife Committee and sort of how it came to be. And for you as somebody who's written about these fish, why are they so important?
Well, one thing at a time. That's almost too many questions. But but here's I always think back, and I wonder, Norman, join me and, you know, tell me what you think, is that we were sort of like a cowboy group. I mean, we had seen these fish. We were all right around this neighborhood. We saw them butting their heads against this rock surface, and they couldn't get up. Occasionally one would get up. And so we just organized to do something about it. And it was kind of fun. And when you show those pictures of all the outside work we did and how we try to learn about each other as neighbors, that's one thing we are doing. Learning about the fish and why they migrate and why migration might have started and why they still come back here. That was another kind of interesting thing. And the answer to the last part was DMR was still stocking Patten stream, but they were going to stop because they were stocking it to see if the run could stay alive, but they wanted to hold the place for the fish so that the town itself or some kind of miracle would fix that culvert. And we turned out to be the miracle, but we had no idea that DMR was doing that at the time. Did I answer your question?
Sure. But about the fish, why are they so important? Why do we care about alewife?
Well, here's what we're finding out is that they are the critical species. of a lot of habitat, especially because they join the ocean with the fresh water, especially because they come in the spring. If you remember, the seals have come back, the ospreys have come back, the bears have gotten out of their dens. All these animals have been either migrating away and come back or are hungry. And so here are, if you picture it before any dams and any culverts, every spring, this enormous rush, I mean, equal to, an Alaskan caribou or perhaps more, come back and they rush up those streams. They're thick. They're so thick. They came into Patten Stream, I was told, Patten Bay, so thick that people fantasized they could walk across the water on them and not get their feet wet. They'd walk on the back of the fish. So what they're also doing is, even though alewives are not like salmon, they don't die after they've made their run. They try to return to the saltwater, and they can come back and forth 4 times even. But they bring a lot of ocean nutrients to the fresh water, which enriches the fresh water. They also take away, when they go, phosphorus, and that's extremely important, because with people with houses around ponds and septic systems that may not be in A+ order, a lot of the phosphorus goes into the ponds and the lakes, and the fish take that and then they migrate out. So they actually clean up those places before they leave. That's just the beginning. The most important thing, in a sentence, is we now have found out through Ted Ames' work, and he's a MacArthur Fellow. He did fabulous work, that codfish used to depend on alewife runs in the spring when they came in, and in the fall as they filtered out. The young did. And so in order to restore the codfish, we got to fix the alewife runs. And that means we have to get rid of dams and culverts.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anybody has been down there, or you can just wait 10 minutes and you'll see the photos pop up here on the screen. It's an immense amount of work that goes into it. It's not as easy as just replacing some of these things. It's pretty amazing work that goes into it, and the partners who are involved. Norman, can you talk about, before the restoration work happened, what were people doing? I mean, you say 12 years ago, you sort of learned about this problem, but we're at the 5th year anniversary of it. So what was happening in those 7 years in between or so, with people getting there to work? What were the volunteers doing? And what even happened before there was an official committee?
Before there was an official committee, it was just the alewives struggling their way up there. It's curious to think that for how many decades or centuries, alewives are going up that stream without any help from anybody else, and the stream didn't change that much in the last hundreds of years. The boulders that were there are there now are still there. The water flows same way. There may be more or less trees in the water, but the shape of the stream and particularly the rocks in it haven't changed, and they've been managing to get by that all that time, and we really don't understand how. It seems impossible. There are places just upstream from where the weir is, actually quite a ways upstream from there. But if you go, the stream runs behind the school, and some distance upstream from there, you run into a waterfall. It's not a nice drop of water. It's just several small drops over boulders. And remember, these fish don't jump. They're not salmon that you see leaping through the air. These fish have to swim in the water. they're very strong swimmers. I mean, you watch them when they're in the current, just directly into the current, they're really strong. And that's how they managed to do it for all those centuries without anybody else's help. But it gets worse as time goes on, and their progress is restricted by for a lot of different reasons. So for mostly, we didn't do anything. The alewives are doing it by themselves. And then once we've kind of discovered the problem, we made a stab at doing something about it, but it was totally ineffective. And we saw that some real concentrated effort had to be made. And that's when we started thinking about what is that concentrated effort. Clearly, we were, with the internet, we researched and found out there are solutions to this situation, and it's called fish ladders. There are all kinds of variations of this. There's some that are literally elevators in Ellsworth at the dam there. The fish come onto a kind of caged in area, which then lifts up to the top of the dam, and they get out there when they're going in that direction. Others are complex structures that allow the fish to go up little at a time, and there's places where off the side where they can rest. And we looked into all this, and we figured we're real smart. We can build one of these. And thanks to Greg Weaver, who has a shop in Surry, he agreed. I don't know why he did, but he thought, of course we can do this. And so we started in on the ladders. And that's the whole story in itself. There were two of them. Didn't work out so well. And we couldn't. The first ladder was about 16 feet long and maybe 2 feet wide. We hauled it down there on top of a car, actually, and lowered the fish ladder from the road over the traffic, the barrier there, and straight down into the stream. It was not hard to do, but it was not easy. And once it was down in the stream, the part that we hadn't anticipated was actually putting it in the water in the right position, fighting all that water coming downstream. And that was kind of an adventure, and took us a while to figure that out. And we actually, for the first one, I don't think we actually got it right. You have to allow a lot of water to come down the chute to encourage the fish to go up the chute. They are attracted to the flow, and they don't go where the water's not running. They go to the place where the most water is running, and that's where we had to put the ladder. And we struggled with that. And you'll see pictures, I think, with that. That one lasted only a few days, I think. It was just all beat up. And the second one.
It was more than all beat up. We came down and it had disappeared, but there were pieces of wood along the water, and then some floating out into the bay. The water had just destroyed it.
Yeah, it disassembled it essentially. Yeah. The second one was somewhat more substantial and larger. Is like, it's more than 2 feet wide and probably 16 feet long. Really heavy. So somebody got a crane, I thought, to get that and help us get it in place, but that didn't work out so well. We ended up carrying it down the path from the road to the stream, which was a very narrow path and very steep and very irregular, and not something you want to carry something that heavy and that awkward. But we did that and got down to the stream, and then again, placing it in the stream was really tricky. You had to have enough water coming down the top of it, which means you had to have it underwater. The top part had to be under the flow, and the bottom part had to open up so that the fish could get actually the other way around. The fish should get in it down on the bottom. That is, there's enough water for them to swim into the ladder, and at the top enough water for them to get out the other side. That one lasted for, I don't remember. It wasn't a big success. Do you remember?
Well, I do remember that the fish rejected it. I mean, we even had an advisor from Department of Marine Resources, but it still didn't work. And so we were still netting, just like in that lower picture here. And we had the labor intensive fish passage, fish ladder, but the fish would start up it and turn around and go back. So
Yeah.
there was another failure. So then we had to ask if we could find somebody who was an engineer for fish passage to design the weir and pool. I mean, we didn't know it was going to be a weir and pool, but we found one. And his name is Joe McLean, and he's worked all over the Blue Hill Peninsula. Isn't that right, Hans? I think so.
Yeah, he has, and he's still working on the passages that are being done this year. He's still the engineer.
And here's the thing is that he did a beautiful design. I mean, if you could, Chrissy, I think you have some pictures of the design, but to figure out how that design is going to work in a place that we're looking at right now with all these different ledges of different sizes, well, it was a fantastic job. And the part I love is the singing bridge from Sullivan. The granite blocks were used from there to make the weir and pool here. So we have a lot of history in those blocks of granite. And I kind of like to think they're still singing. It's just a different kind of song.
That's right. That's cool. I didn't know that those blocks came over. That's really nice.
Yeah.
Here's your fish ladder, Norman.
Yeah. You can see what a struggle it was. We thought the hard part would be to get it down the hill. Never thought about how hard it would be to get it in the water in the right position. It was really quite a struggle. Fortunately, no one got hurt in this whole process, which is astounding. Yeah. But Susan, do you remember what they told us this would cost when they first came up with the design for this? Because I remember, we were making these fish ladders for a couple $100, and we figured, well, you just move these rocks around and, do this and that. How hard can this be? And the number they gave us was astronomical.
Well, I don't know, but Tom Welgas, who is our town treasurer, and we could not have done this work without him. I mean, he is really a phenomenal person. And there's Ted Ames giving his talk about cod and alewives right there on the picture on the left. Tom sent me the money that we received, and it was $223,000, a little more than that. And we got it from Department of Transportation, Department of Marine Resources, Blue Hill Heritage Trust and Maine Coast Heritage Trust, the town of Surry, and also some federal money. I mean, it was amazing. But we were begging for money. We were begging for a plan for years. But alewives weren't sexy. And then suddenly they became the big thing along this coast. And money was put into them. And it just has changed, A, the way people think about fish, and B, the habitats around those restored places. I think it's a fabulous Maine story because it's not just Patten Stream. And look at the work of moving those. I mean, it's unbelievable to me that they moved those rocks like that and set up the design so beautifully.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing to go and see the finished product and see how just beautiful it is, for one thing, but also to sort of get to know the complexity behind how they set it. You touch a little about the complexity, because this, I mean, as they were saying, this isn't just throwing some stone down. There's a lot of sort of like math and engineering that's put into these plans.
Yeah, there are multiple levels of the complexity of a number of which have been touched on. But there's there's the engineering complexity of these projects, which is to design a rock ramp and a pool which is graded properly so that at high water, you can see on the picture, at high water, there are places along the edges where the fish can get up. And as the water goes down, the water channels into the center and this fish can still move up. And that in and of itself is a real engineering process. There is also the complexity of putting the money together for these projects that Susan was talking about. And that almost always relies, or it has on this peninsula, it has always relied on many different players coming, private funders as well as public funders coming to the table with significant amounts of money. And a couple of $100,000 is cheap for one of these things, because some of them can run up close to $1 million. And the other complexity, which shouldn't be overlooked, is the regulatory complexity of putting one of these together, because you have all these overlapping jurisdictions of DMR who care about the fish and DOT that cares about the road, and all of that has to be negotiated and permitted. So all of that means a tremendous amount of work for whoever is overseeing one of these projects. They take multiple years to put together and to complete. There's one happening on Parker Pond this summer, which has been underway now for 2 years. And the work is actually going to get done this year, and the rock ramp will be in place, and the fish will hopefully be running up it next spring. But it's taken years to get it all put together.
You know, the thing that I find,
It's pretty incredible.
go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, the thing that I find so amazing is if we had known the amount of time it would have taken and the amount of things that we had to know and the work we had to do, I think we might have walked away from the fish. But because it was step by step, we kept being stubborn about it, and we stayed. And in a way we changed, because there's nothing like working with members of your community to save something in your town. There's nothing better than that. It is saving in a way of preserving what I like to think of as a commons. And it changes you. It changes the way you think about the town and your neighbors.
Yeah.
That's so nice. I love that. And I think that by seeing the success of a project so locally, probably it didn't seem as daunting of a task for some of the other communities. And now there are several of these places that we can go and visit this time of year to see these beautiful fish ladders and, the weir pool, to get to experience this natural phenomenon of them doing this huge mission. And if you haven't seen them and they're interested, of course, please go see Patten Stream. And then there's also one at Pierce's Pond in Penobscot, White's Pond, Walker's Pond, and soon to be Parker Pond, as Hans mentioned. And they're up and down the coast of Maine too. I mean, Damariscotta has a huge one, and they're all over the place. It's really exciting to see. And so Norman, many years ago, the Surry Alewife Committee was sort of netting and hauling up and over the fish in order to save the species and to try and do your part. What's the focus of the Alewife Committee today?
It's still the fish. The second part of the whole thing, which we hadn't anticipated, after we get the fish up there, Marine Resources wants us to count them, so they know how we're doing, and it's a very interesting process. I wish we had some of the pictures up. There's which shows how we do this, but there's the spot up the stream just before the stream goes into the pond, where this bridge goes across, and it's Route 192, 170. What is it? The road there. Anyway, there's a bridge that goes across the water, and it narrows the whole thing, and it's not terribly deep, so maybe a couple feet deep. So with their from their instructions, what we did is we got a bunch of white sandbags and placed them on the bottom of the stream, going in a line across the flow of the water. Just like 1 or 2 layers of sandbags. The point is to make a white line at the bottom that's easy to see, and then sit on the side of the stream and watch for the fish to come by. And usually, they come by in bunches, so it's hard to say how accurate the count is. But you're sitting there for about half an hour, and often you'll sit there for like 25 minutes, and in the last 5 minutes, everything happens. And what happens is be 30 or 40 fish in a pack just go right by you like that. And after a while you learn to count the group. You've seen enough fish coming in smaller groups, so you know that a group that big is 10 fish, approximately. But when you see the group is that big, well, it must be 20 or 30 fish, and you make that approximation. It's really quite amazing to see them come in a great wave too. They come very quickly, and you're only about like 5 feet away from where they come through, so you're close enough to get the full impact of that rush. And we have to do that now every year after when they start coming back. After they're in the bay and coming up the stream. This year, everything's a little earlier, and I think generally in Surry it's been early in most places. But we just have to keep an eye out for that, and then start having people stationed there at the stream to count the fish. That's something we most everybody who's been involved with this for some time signs up for a period on the side of the stream there. But we do have some empty spots. If you're interested in doing this, not demanding, but very interesting job, give Barbara a call and she can put you on the list. But that's what we do now. That's mostly it. And there's a great picture of the fish there. Nothing else needs to be done, really. Yeah, I'm sure there are probably some like steps that could be taken to minimize the amount of alewives that are killed at sea, because they are a bait fish for the lobster industry, and they are bait fish for all kinds of other fishing. And so they are taken at sea, and they also are taken as they come in and out of the bay and the stream. We probably could restrict that somewhat if we worked at that, but mostly they're taking care of themselves. They managed it for millennia, and now they're doing it again with our help a little bit.
That's right. And there are a couple of questions popped up asking if they're running right now, and they are. I was at Patten Stream on Friday, and actually you're about to see a photo that I took on Friday, and you see my daughter in the background looking at the fish. And there were a lot, although I will say some folks went on Saturday and didn't see any. So it can be a little hit or miss, but and they are running at all the other ponds that I mentioned as well. And if anybody is interested in helping with the counting at Patten Stream, or if you live on the other side of the peninsula and you want to do one in Brooksville, feel free to just shoot me an email at the Trust, and I can connect you with the folks in Surry and all over in the Bagaduce area who are doing this work. It's good work to do, because it does sort of show the success of these, and I think will help fund future projects as we move forward, which is really great.
Chrissy, may I say something really quick?
Yeah.
When you sit under the culvert counting the fish, I've been accused of watching the warblers and letting the fish go by, but that's not true. But it's so peaceful, and all you hear is the water, and you get away from your everyday task, and it's a wonderful moment. And so to be able to do it is also another gift. And this woman who's standing with her arm around Norman, who's just made that kiosk right there, is Barbara Tedesco. And she and her husband take scale samples from a certain number of alewives to age them and then they sex them. They open them up and sex them. And they send all that information. They're working with DMR. So it's very, there's a scientific basis, but also it's sort of a spiritual thing. And the only other thing that Norman didn't mention is sometimes we have to do what is called notching dams. And you go out with a clam hoe and you stick it into the dam and you pull it, and a little hunk of the dam comes away, and the fish
Beaver.
just come right through. Beaver Dam. Yeah. Oh, you probably thought I meant the Ellsworth Dam, the Beaver Dam. And so the fish come through the Beaver Dam, and then in the evening, the beavers come out and they patch it up again. But it just gives them a little chute to get through.
Yeah.
Getting back to
I mean,
Barbara and Pat, they're a couple. They lived in Surry. They are the rock of this whole operation. Pat knows everything there is to know about fish. Fish around here. He fishes everything that swims. They're fantastic cooks. Their fish dishes are endless and incredible. And Barbara is just so competent at organizing things, which we are not. And we really depend on the two of them for an awful lot of what we do. And we're really, really glad that they're with us.
Yeah, that's true.
yeah, and there's many people, I think, who are involved with the committee, right? Who all, I mean, they're counting and they're, doing so many different jobs to help out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's, as you said, Susan, it's a part of a sort of collective team, and it makes you feel pretty good about your community and your fellow man to work on projects like this together.
Well, the other thing is, if you read the papers, what you learn is so much destruction that's been caused by our species. To be able to do something that's restorative is an enormous gift.
That's probably the most important thing in my mind about, and what is really exciting about these alewife projects is it is not only the restoration of an alewife run and the ecosystems services that they provide. It's also the restoration of a relationship between human beings and this wild species, which has been part of this peninsula, from the very beginning. And pardon me, a bit of a digression here, but the meaning of these fish runs for me is that 10,000 years ago, this whole peninsula was under ice, and there were no streams running. And then the glacier started to melt, and the ocean was all the way up in Millinocket, and there weren't any streams running on this peninsula. And then the land started to rebound out of the ocean, and it wasn't, until 5,000 or 6,000 years ago that this peninsula started looking like something that we would recognize, and the streams started flowing, and people were here. And the fish were trying to get up the rivers as the rivers were created. And I have no doubt that for thousands of years, people have been notching beaver dams to let fish up through the river. And because the fish helped people, so people helped fish. And this is the restoration of not only something communal over generations within sort of modern society, grandparents bringing their grandchildren now to see alewives that they watched when they were kids, but it's the recreation of something approaching a much longer relationship between human beings in this landscape. And that kind of restoration is what needs to happen at a much broader scale. Alewives is just the beginning.
Yeah.
Amen. Yeah.
And I think for me, one of the really exciting things that came out of this, especially as at the time I was the new outreach coordinator for the trust, this was such field trip gold. I mean, the kids loved going to the stream and being able to get wet and hold fish. And, I could sneak some knowledge in there too. And talk to them about the importance of, sort of stewarding your place and and recognizing when maybe we made some decisions, 100 years ago that we didn't realize the impacts, and this is what we can do to restore it and to make good on it. And so we'll hopefully have this new generation of young people who are excited to do more work like this and are pumped about it because it was their favorite thing to do as a kid, to go see the Alewife running or, different things like that. So it gives me a lot of hope for the future when I take big groups of kids down there. And Bailey Bowden, who is just, he is sort of like the king of all of this and the Bagadoos and doing so much good work there. One of his favorite stories is, he had taken a group, I think it was from the Bay School, to Pierce's Pond before the fish ladder even was a thing, and netted some fish and showed the kids, and the kids all got to hold the fish and do all that stuff. And they had just been on some very fancy field trip to like Boston to an art museum and other things. And the kids all said, the hands down, this was way better, way more fun than any other fancy field trips they've ever been on. They really love doing it and love the work. It's exciting. And I'll add, because Jim Dowd sent along several really great notes of his recollections of all these things. And he mentioned that a scientist with DMR, Claire Enterline, and also Slade Moore, who is a consultant, were really key players in all of this,
Absolutely.
especially in working with some of the landowners who, were abutting this property where this work needed to happen, and the negotiations there, which were really critical for the property. So, there's so much that goes to these projects, and it's, you don't just get to go into the stream and do the work. You have to involve all of these other groups and landowners and neighbors and all sorts of things. It's really, it's a huge effort, but the results are pretty astounding. So we can revisit Alewife as we need to, but we're gonna take a little jump up the stream. And Hans, I'd like for you, but first let's just wait for this photo. Jim Dow said, please find a photo from Kane's store, which is now Pugnuts, and of the dried alewives for sale outside. And amazingly, I was able to find one thanks to the town of Surrey's annual report in 2018. It was online. So such a great photo of this.
Did you know Wilbur, Chrissy?
Yeah,
Huh?
it's Kane. It's Mr.
Yeah, Mr. Kane. Yeah.
Yeah. Wilbur Kane.
Yeah, so fun. So Hans, as we go upstream, that little original parcel of Patten Stream, the 41-acre parcel, now there are several other parcels that are sort of attached to it and in that whole watershed. Can you talk a little bit about how all of that came to be, and all of so we'll have some maps on in just a minute.
Yeah, you had a good map there of the whole watershed of Patten Stream a minute ago, and what we're talking about, or what I'll talk about, is mostly the eastern side of that watershed. That picture of the dried fish reminded me of stories my grandfather used to tell of fixing the roof shingles with dried fish when he when he was a kid. So Patten Stream, the preserve, was conserved in 2008, 2009, and the fish ladder was done, and things sort of percolated along. And then in 2019, no, excuse me, before that, 2017, when I got here, we were not yet even done with the process of buying Surry Forest when another gigantic block of land that belonged to Herb Haynes came up for sale. And in a collaborative effort with a bunch of other conservation organizations in Downeast, which we formed ourselves into something called the Downeast Forest Project. And what turned into Meadowbrook Forest was our piece of that. with the help of a really substantial federal grant and some private funding as well, we were able to conserve what had been a 2,000 acre block of forest land owned by Herb Haynes. And right about the same time, the Lawrences were beginning the project, the YMCA project in Blue Hill, and that project was impacting some wetlands, what used to be known as the Frog Pond up behind trade winds, and so they needed to mitigate that for state permitting, and they called the trust and asked if there was some project that they could be involved in where they could help conserve some wetlands that would mitigate the for the purposes of the state. And it just so happened that the 4 lots which belong to Dave Warren, which are behind that yellow house as you're leaving, there's a yellow house that sits up on which was the Warren's house. All the land up behind there was for sale. And so the Lawrences helped purchase part of that land. And this was 2018, 2019, and put it under conservation. And then some anonymous donors came and bought the lower 2 lots, or gave us the money so that we could buy the lower 2 lots along the road. And so all of a sudden, what had been a less than 100 acre preserve is now really protecting a substantial portion of the eastern part of the Patten Stream watershed in Meadowbrook Forest and Patten Stream Preserve. And if you get a chance, as Patten Stream Preserve is beautiful. It's its own little world in there that I just described earlier. If you go up the stream, if you go into Meadowbrook Forest, you get into these really expansive wetland meadows that used to be hayed seasonally. Hundreds of acres of wetland meadow up in there, which feed the stream. Just a beautiful area, and then all the upland forest that feeds into those. From the north. This property is now our biggest property. It is the biggest habitat block that we protect. It is a large piece of forest land, which gives us a canvas on which to do certain kinds of management, forest management, wildlife management, to not only protect land, but now to start to work with lands to regrow the forest and enhance the ecosystems to the benefit of everything downstream, really.
Can you talk a little bit? So we've had studies done of the peninsula by a wildlife biologist and sort of looking at watersheds and wildlife corridors and areas that, have sort of really high conservation value for multiple reasons. Can you talk about why having these sort of contiguous parcels of land is so important?
A couple of different reasons. Wildlife movement across the landscape is tremendously important seasonally for a lot of species. And also in relation to climate change, the ability for species to move across the landscape is going to be increasingly important as things change more and more. And wetland complexes are always the most ecologically rich places on the landscape. And they also are the sanctuaries for species that are stressed by any number of factors. And having large areas of land that can act as islands allows different animals, plants, birds to move across the wider landscape, having these places to rest, islands essentially to move around. And the bigger the islands, the better it is for the overall health of various species. And the more wetlands that can be involved in those blocks, the better for everything.
great. Susan, as a writer who has focused a lot on the sort of local environment that we have here, and somebody who's been involved, with some of these projects, what do you think about all of this conservation work and sort of what this footprint looks like? Did you ever imagine it would be so big?
No. What I think about it is a kind of hope, a kind of prayer for hope, because we never imagined that we would need it so badly and that we'd rise to the situation as well as we have. I mean, the Blue Hill Heritage Trust makes such a difference, and it's such a model. It's I find it overwhelming and it's such an honor to be a part of it. But the thing is that what we're doing is we're able to teach children this kind of hope and this kind of work, rather than to teach them all the things they've lost. I mean, the loss is enormous, but also people working together to save their places, that's an enormous machine of energy, that can make a difference. And teaching them to love everything. Look at the porcupine and the snapping turtle, and the mourning cloak. Children today have the most wonderful opportunity to go out on these walks and talks, I think. And my work, when I do write a children's book, is again to say the same thing. The idea to extend the idea of commons beyond just one species, so that these children grow up thinking that commons means us and others too. That's as simple as that.
Very, very, very few of us have the ability or the opportunity to make change at the global level individually. We can all make change locally with the help of others, which in turn will affect the global situation. And that's the hope and the power of this kind of local work.
Well said.
Absolutely. Hans, what is access from Surry to Meadowbrook Forest going to look like? Because we now own, property that goes right to the Surry Road, and that will be opening up here. What is that going to look like for folks?
It's hopefully it's going to look really great. We are going to we have a parking lot put in at this point, right behind that yellow house, and there will be signage that will guide people in. We're not quite done with the access. We haven't gotten our signage in place yet for people to walk in there and not get lost on the various logging traces that are available to walk on. But you will be able to essentially, you can even walk from Pugnuts to the trailhead and then walk all the way up to Route 1. It would be a 4 or 5 mile walk. And we might even someday be able to connect in with the Black House Museum in Ellsworth, and so you might be able to get an ice cream cone and then ride your bike to Rooster Brothers for a cup of coffee. That's the long-term goal. But yeah, starting hopefully in the middle of the summer, you will be able to park right near the gatherings in the parking area there and walk in to Meadowbrook from the south. There will be a small stream crossing that you'll have to do until it's a kind of a substantial bridge that we're going to have to build, and I'm not sure when we're going to get around to being able to do that. But yeah, you'll be able to go in, and it's a lovely walk up through there.
It is absolutely. Yeah.
So a couple of questions that have popped up. David wants to know if all of this work, this Alewife restoration work, has made a measurable impact on the cod population. Anybody know?
I think it's too early to tell.
Yeah.
It's still going on. And it's very hard to figure that sort of thing out. Yeah.
Yeah.
It takes a long time.
And
But for a
David,
long time,
yeah, go ahead.
alewife is a significant species for this entire region, including the cod out in the ocean. You know, it's a key species, feeds everybody else.
Yeah, that's right. Everything eats alewives.
Mm.
And David Porter wanted to point out, he had a comment and a question. David is our local go-to mycologist, and he always a fabulous walk presentation for, and he said Patten Street has great mushroom diversity in the fall. And I can attest, I am very annoying to hike with in the fall. I want to stop every 5 feet, take a picture of the new mushroom that I found. He also wanted to know if alewife run in specific streams like salmon do.
They do.
Oh, shall I answer that?
Go for
Yes.
it. Well, when the Department of Marine Resources, for instance, was trucking fish and putting them into Lower Patten Pond, so they would spawn and go out. The idea was that they might try to return to the pond where they were caught before they were brought to Lower Patten, but that the fish that hatched from the eggs and then came down the stream and went out to sea for 4 years and came back would be bonded to Lower Patten Pond and would come up Lower Patten Pond. And that is true for most alewives, that they will at least try to get up to their natal ponds. If there's some reason they can't, they may turn out and go to another one. Or even worse, what they do is they'll go out and they'll drop their eggs right in the bay, where they'll get eaten. I mean, they're not going to develop in the bay, and they'll just miss the whole season. So they try to get to their natal ponds.
Interesting. And so it's interesting because the pygmy alewife run at Walker's Pond, which is a big deal. And I guess that is why you don't see pygmy alewife in other ponds, because they were born in that pond, or maybe they were stocked in that pond, and that's why there's a bunch of pygmy alewife there.
You know, I have a lot to learn. I have no idea about pygmy alewives. I can't wait to see them.
Yeah, there's actually a certain amount of debate about whether pygmy alewives really exist or not, and they are stocking Parker Pond with the alewives from Walker Pond.
Okay.
So alewives certainly do come in different sizes. I've heard them referred to in terms of canning jar size, quart size alewives, and pint size alewives.
That's a Manor thing.
That's right.
That's excellent. Good. Well, we have gone through the questions, but a lot of people saying, thank you. And they really did not know this story before, and that Susan and Norman are their heroes. And all sorts of
Hans is their hero.
And Hans, yes. And all of the just amazing list of partners who help make these conservation projects happen, who help make these, restoration projects and, supportive wildlife projects happen. It's just incredible. And I'm sorry that Jim couldn't be here with us. He shared that he was really excited when the trust acquired those additional parcels of land, sort of that helped connect Meadowbrook Forest with Patten Stream, because back when they were initially looking at the first Patten Stream parcel, and had actually walked with him and Siona from Manco's Heritage Trust into those other parcels and showed them that, as Hans was saying, just how beautiful it is back there. And so it was exciting for Jim as the retired ED to see those properties finally living with Blue Hill Heritage Trust and in, you know, in conservation in perpetuity for folks. It's sort of the long game, and it doesn't all happen at once, but boy, what a difference, you know, 10 years, 12 years can make with a project like this. It's pretty incredible. And for folks who have not been to Patten Stream Preserve or out to Meadowbrook, Meadowbrook's a 5-mile loop, so it's hefty, but it's a great bike ride. And Patten Stream is so beautiful. And from this time of year on through the fall, I highly recommend hiking it multiple times, because you'll always see different things blooming, different things in the river. It's a really remarkable place. And Meadowbrook also has beautiful, you know, water scenic areas to go and explore. And it's very beautiful, such a special area. So yeah. So Norman or Susan or Hans, do you have any closing words before we sign off here?
No.
I don't think so, no. Thanks to everybody for presenting with me and attending as well.
Yeah,
It's a beautiful day out there. We should go
It
out
is.
and enjoy some of the rest of it.
that's right.
Yeah.
It still is. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody who joined us on this gorgeous day. And we'll put this up on our website here in a couple of days. And again, if you are inspired by this story and you want to get involved with either the work of the Alewife committees on the peninsula or with Blue Hill Heritage Trust, if you want to support conservation and work like this, you know where to find us. And we love your support of all kinds, and we can't do it without you. So thank you so much to Susan and Norman and Hans for sharing this story. And we'll be back with more stories of place in the fall after we're done with our busy summer season. So thank you so much. And
Thanks
somebody
again.
was just asking one very last minute question, I believe, about how to find the fish ladder from Pugnuts. So we'll just say, if you park across the street from Pugnuts in the little parking lot there and cross that crosswalk, you're gonna turn and you're gonna walk towards Ellsworth, and you'll see right before the bridge, there's a very steep dirt road that goes down and around to the fish way and the weir ponds and stuff like that there. So that's where you can find those. Okay, good. We're gonna sign off. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a really wonderful evening.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.